Well, everybody, welcome back to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. Happy New Year to all of you. First video of 2025. Hope you had a nice holiday season, spent time with your loved ones, maybe worked on some projects. I've been doing a lot of the first and not so much of the second, but I have made some progress. And it's time to get back in gear and start getting some more stuff done down here in the workshop. So I guess without too much fuss, here's where we're at. The last video you saw, the rolling chassis for this project is ready to go. I need to get the drivetrain into it. And that's what we're doing today. Now this is my donor truck, the one that the tree fell on and crushed. And I've got the drivetrain ready to be lifted up out of it and set down into this one. Now there are a few small things that I'll need to do. I need to replace a couple exhaust manifold bolts. Not a big deal, done that a bunch of times. And I had planned on going through and completely resealing this engine. I bought a whole engine gasket kit, valve cover gaskets, front and rear cover gaskets, front and rear main seals, oil pan gasket, all of that stuff. And you can see pretty well from here. And I'll show you once I have it hanging on the hoist so you can get a little bit better view, but man, this engine and transmission is really clean. I am gonna put the new valve cover gaskets on it and, and like I said, I'll do the exhaust manifold bolts, but otherwise I'm not gonna mess with it. The front cover, everything is clean and dry. The rear cover, everything is clean and dry. The oil pan is all clean and dry. So I don't see any reason to mess with any of those gaskets. They're not leaking. I'm just as likely to create a leak by replacing them. So I'm just gonna leave those alone. I'm gonna get it lifted up, set into the frame, and then we'll fix those exhaust manifold bolts and the valve cover gaskets. So let me find a good place to get you propped up here and you can see how I do this. And I'll bring you back once it's sitting down into its new home. I do have brand new motor mounts. I do have a brand new transmission mount. So it is gonna get new mounts, but otherwise, very little to mess with in this drivetrain. We're out, we're rotated. I got my new motor mounts on and you can see, like, look how clean this engine is. Nothing around the dampener, nothing around the front cover, nothing around the oil pan. Teeniest bit of weep from something, which honestly may just be weeping down from the valve covers. And a little bit here at the rubber plug in the case where they always breathe a little oil. But overall, this thing, clean. New transmission mount, new motor mount on this side. So like I said, it doesn't make sense to me to replace a bunch of gaskets that aren't leaking. So once I get it set down in, we'll do the exhaust manifolds. There's no broken bolts on this side, but they look to be the original bolts, so they're probably not long for the world. I've got two on the other side, so we'll get all those fixed up. We'll do the valve cover gaskets, and then we'll start getting everything else connected back up to it. Exhaust, fuel lines, all that stuff. But first, get it back in the frame and get it bolted down. All right, well, big milestone. The engine and transmission and transfer case are in their new frame. I've got the engine mounts, motor mounts, and transmission mounts bolted down tight. Front drive shaft hooked back up. I'm working on getting the fuel lines hooked back up. And basically, it's just a bunch of small, tedious, not very exciting things to do. Like I said before, the exhaust manifold bolts, the valve cover gaskets, I'll get the fuel line hooked up, I'll get the exhaust hooked back up, maybe a few other little odds and ends, but it's not something I can show huge visual changes. It doesn't translate well in video. So I'm just gonna get after it, and I'll bring you guys back in a little bit and show you where I'm at. Well, it's a few days later, team. I've been down here steadily plugging away. Here's what's finished up. So as far as the chassis, I'm pretty sure I've got everything on this chassis ready to accept the new cab, except for the body mounts. I have them here. I'm not gonna sit them on until I'm ready to actually put the new cab down on it. But I've got all new fluid in the transfer case, all new fluid in the transmission. Important note, if you're working on one of these, the GM NV 4500 transmissions, they specify a very specific oil, and it's actually called manual transmission oil. And there weren't a lot of places I could find it. I wound up getting it from Valvoline, but it's not something, you're probably not gonna be able to run down to your local Napa or wherever and find this stuff. I had to dig around a little bit to find some. But that's filled up, proper fluid in there. Front diff full, rear diff full, engine full, new filter on the engine. Front drive shaft is hooked up, exhaust is all hooked up, oxygen sensors are all hooked up, fuel lines are all plumbed in, as you can see, and that all fit really well. I'm happy with how that is. And you can see I got the chassis harness back on this thing too, and clipped in, placed in. My chassis grounds, I ground off my paint, cleaned up the actual grounds themselves, and then bolted them back, painted over top to try to keep everything nice, corrosion free, and making good contact for a long time. If you're familiar with these trucks, you know they can develop some odd issues, and often they are ground related. So always check your grounds, make sure you have good grounds. What else? Oh, did the exhaust manifold bolts like I told you about. I did the valve cover gaskets like I told you about, both sides, new Felpro valve cover gaskets. And yeah. Like I said, I can't think of anything else to do to this thing that is gonna be easier with the cab off than it will be with the cab on. So next step is what you can see behind me over here. This is my donor truck. And this thing is in a light front end crash, front end hit. It crunched the grill, bent the hood, bent the bumper, and it tweaked this fender a little bit. And unfortunately, and it did deploy the airbags. And unfortunately, that's enough that it'll total one of these things. But this truck's only got 99,000 miles on it, and the cab is beautiful. There is not a speck or spot of rust anywhere on this thing, top, bottom, inside, and out. So I'm gonna get this thing into position, get the cab off of it, And probably next thing you see will be getting this cab placed back down onto this chassis. So I'll see you guys then. All right, well, a couple hours later, time to wrap it up for the day. I've got other stuff to do this afternoon, but we made good progress. Got the cab up in the air, everything unhooked. I'll be able to roll the chassis back and get the engine and transmission and transfer case pulled out of it. Should be pretty easy to access. But I wanted to show you guys, this could be the cleanest cab I've ever had. I mean, this thing is so nice. And you can see here, like, all my inner rockers, solid, no rust in them. The floor pans, solid. On the other inner rocker, clean. And the outside's also a little dirty, but I mean, no rust in this cab. So it'll nicely complement our chassis, the bed that I have, and the front clip, fenders, hood, all of that stuff. So that's it for today. I'm really happy with the progress. I'm excited to be able to get this cab down onto the chassis. Again, look how clean. Clean, solid, factory rockers, factory paint, everything. So nice. I do have a little bit to do before I can sit that cab down on here. And the primary thing being, we got to cut the hole in the floor for the shifter. And since I'm going to need to swap, I've already taken most of the interior out of this truck to use in other projects. Because this truck originally has a really nice interior. So most of this interior is going to go into that other cab. So I got to pull the interior out of there anyway, and I will, once I have the interior out, I'll be able to take measurements, get a really accurate positioning to get the shifter hole cut out for both the transmission and the transfer case shifters. And then we'll get that cab sit down onto here. So I'll probably, actually, you know, maybe that's just a good stopping point for this video. I think I'm going to call it for this one, guys. Next video, we'll get it all put back together. I'll show you my cutting and fitting and finagling and all of that jazz. But that's it for this one. Thanks a lot for watching. It's nice to be back. Hope you're all having a good start to 2025. And until the next video, take care.